But kind of the gist of our work, as well as the Clean Cities Network, is to assist private and government fleets in their conversion to using alternative fuels, as well as sustainable transportation opportunities or options. So we help develop alternative fuel infrastructure to help get those vehicles out there on the road, whether that's electric, propane, compressed natural gas, and we're hearing a little bit more about hydrogen. And then we also educate the public about the benefits of alternative fuels. So that's just who we are as an organization. So now we're going to just talk about why electric? Why is that an option? So in the United States, it looks like my slide presentation got a little funky. It was a PDF that got changed to a PowerPoint. I apologize, but I think you can still see the content. But you'll see the transportation sector comprises the most greenhouse gas emissions out of any sector. And then of those emissions, light duty vehicles is 60%, medium and heavy duty 26%. So this ordinance and looking at some of this EV infrastructures is currently looking a little bit more at addressing those emissions from the light duty vehicles. And then here, right here in Teton County, the last greenhouse gas emissions inventory that we completed shows that almost 65% of our emissions come from ground transportation. So there's certainly reason to address that. And here you can see we have very clean energy. We're very fortunate with that in Teton County through Lower Valley Energy. So you can see a gasoline vehicle, it's 11,435 pounds of CO2 if you're kind of the average user of your vehicle each year. And then on LVE's electric mix, it reduces down to 200. So there's a massive greenhouse gas emission reduction and benefit in our community. So, whoopsie, I'm skipping ahead, sorry. So that's kind of why electric, and now think why this ordinance. So maybe we were trying to figure out which of our presentations made the most sense to go first. So I'm going to be talking about the ordinance a little bit before the specifics, but in general, the ordinance is going to help get more charging stations at multi-unit dwellings, as well as workplaces and commercial developments and such. So some of the importance that we see in having this ordinance is that it will help get more charging infrastructure at multi-unit dwellings. There's currently none in the community. So, and 80% of charging occurs at the home. 30% of the town's housing stock is multi-unit dwellings. And often those could be rentals, and they were built without maybe the owner having the ability to make sure that there's the infrastructure included to put a charging station there. And then there's benefits to those living in multi-unit dwellings or elsewhere to owning and operating an electric vehicle. Your fuel costs can be reduced by as much as 92%. Sometimes, or we are aware that sometimes there's a premium to purchase an electric vehicle, but once you're looking at your fuel costs, you can notice a lot of savings. And then installing at the time of construction, it costs 75% less to install a station at time of construction compared to retrofitting. So we're trying to save some money here, as well as increasing the amount of EV infrastructure available in the community. So why do we want to get more EV infrastructure in our community? You can see here that the amount of EV registrations are increasing. The blue line is hybrid, so that's kind of a big, maybe I should have just had a chart that had plug or EV, but you can still see that it's growing exponentially. And then in the country, and from 2020 to 2021, the amount of EVs registered or sold doubled. So if we project EV growth in our community based on the previous year's adoptions and what we're seeing at the national level, we could see as many as, that is wrong. I think it's supposed to be 3,000, oopsie, by 2030. So we want to make sure that we have the infrastructure for charging available for these vehicles that we're going to be seeing in our community. Regardless if we reach that amount, we're certainly already seeing a lot more. The numbers that I have are from fall fall of 2022. And so the projected amount for 2022 total was 207. In the fall, there's already 228. So I don't have the number at like December 31st, 2022, but hopefully I'll have that soon and can share that, but I'm sure it's more. And then some of the growth of these electric vehicles, or the adoption of it, is due to the availability of EVs. There are so many different models. All of the major manufacturers of vehicles have announced their plans for EVs, and I think you all are aware of some of the exciting vehicles that are out there. The availability keeps growing. So looking at the station, current station availability in the community, there's 22 station locations and 49 charging ports. And of these stations, there's the majority, there's a lot at lodging, which is great. There's a lot of public level 2 stations, which has the town and the county have shown great leadership in installing those. We're very fortunate. I don't know the exact number, but probably per capita, we have more stations publicly available than a lot of other communities, which is wonderful. And then we also have quite a few public DC fast charging stations. Only 2 are universal, the rest are those Tesla ones at Whole Foods. But yeah, so we're doing all right at the moment. As you can see, there isn't any located at any multi-unit dwellings. Go ahead.
It's a level 2 park.
I think I'm gonna get to that in just a second.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. So, but in using some of the tools that we have available to us through the Department of Energy, the Clean Cities program, we use this EVI Pro Lite projection tool. And so if we're looking at the number of vehicles growing to 3,719 by 2030, and understanding that only 80% of the vehicles have access, actually it should have been 70% if I said 30% of the housing stock is multi-unit dwellings, but this is just an example scenario, but you'll see that we still have a long way to go in what we need to support that amount of vehicles in our community. And so these are the different charging infrastructure types. So I apologize, maybe this should have been a little sooner, but type of charger, level 1 is just a 110 outlet. It's basically the cord that comes with your vehicle. I use that. I have a plug-in hybrid, and I just plug it into the outside of my condo and then into my car, and I get it says approximately 5 miles of range per hour of charging. So this is meant for residential, and it's pretty slow, but it still gets you charged up. It's useful for plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, I think, that don't have as big of range as a full electric vehicle. So then level 2 is 240 volt in residential settings, 208 volt in commercial settings, and this provides you approximately 25 miles range per hour of charging. And these stations are also useful for kind of longer dwell times, workplace. If you're there during your workday for 8 hours, you can get a fair amount of charge from that, and overnight as well. Then DC fast charging is the big stations here. So this picture actually shows one of the DC fast charging units with a level 2 next to it. And the DC fast charging stations, depending on the kilowatt capacity of that charger, can range from, you can possibly get 80% of your charge of your vehicle in 20 minutes. And then this is just a list of kind of charging infrastructure that is potentially out there. I probably need to update this, but we're aware of 7 DC fast charging stations and 30-ish level 2 coming online. So this ordinance is going to help add to that level 2 amount that we need more of. And then I just have some slides in here. Grand Teton National Park they have some plans on where what makes sense. They prepared this for a grant opportunity, or I guess it wasn't necessary. It's called NEVI, and it's a Department of Energy or Department of Transportation grant that funds charging stations along alternative fuel corridors. So this actually, we're not along one of those. So it was kind of more informative. Same with Yellowstone. But it's good to know that in the national parks, which, a lot of the reason people come to visit this region is to go through those national parks. They're thinking about this and working toward it. And then just some community info to consider too. We have 15,300 employees live local, but you can see in this visual from one of the housing studies, a lot of people commute. And then we have millions of visitors that come through. So certainly we want to make sure that we have enough charging infrastructure for our own community, but we also want to have enough infrastructure for those that are visiting here, because actually I think it's about 15% of those ground transportation emissions are attributed to the tourists that come to our community. So looking at ownership costs. So this is important, thinking through if you're going to be installing one of these through the ordinance. There's a wide range. I have several slides here that kind of shows different price estimates, but the level 2 commercial is like, it varies based on the type of unit that you've selected. You can get just a station that's really just, it can be wall mounted. There's nothing fancy about it. And you don't have to do any sort of like trenching of concrete. You just plop it on a wall. That's going to be pretty inexpensive for you. Then you could get a fancier station that's a pedestal and it's networked, it's connected to the internet, and you have all sorts of tracking capabilities, and you want to very specifically located next to your building, which you have to trench through your parking lot to make happen. So that is going to be a lot more expensive. DC fast charging stations, these are kind of the ranges as well for that, though that's not necessarily the conversation we're having today. This is also kind of showing those different ranges for a level 2 charging station and the prices. So again, 500 all the way up to 6,000 based on the functionality you want from that charging station. And the ordinance fortunately leaves a lot of flexibility for whoever's installing that station. You could do the $500 station and have it there and not have the tracking capabilities, but maybe that's something that you're really interested in, so you want to do that. So there's that. And this is a visual that our project manager in Bozeman developed, and it kind of shows that if you choose one of those non-network stations, you don't have annual fees and they're a lot less expensive. And so a thought that people have to decide on when they offer these level 2 stations is if they're going to offer the charging for free as an amenity, or if they want to charge for the charge. And basically, it just depends on the owner of the station, but you could offer, based on these annual fees and the cost of these network stations, you can often offer free charging for several years before breaking even in that first year. So that's what this shows, and just something to consider. And then he also developed, this is helpful too. Oh shoot, what's happening? A calculator, and this is on our Drive Electric Greater Yellowstone. I think it's, I'll have to share that, but it's like Drive Electric GYE website. And so this is helpful to put in, to get just like a bare bones cost estimate of what it would cost to install a level 2 station. So you put in your amperage, number of chargers, distance from panel, and this at least gives you kind of that at cost. Certainly, there'll be more expenses of just the labor to install and that sort of thing that will be varied depending on who you go with. But I think this is a really good way so you can understand what those costs could be. And then just looking at kind of the reasoning behind this ordinance too, is it's just so much less expensive to put in this station, or at least the conduit, the things necessary to put in a station in the future at the time of construction. So you can see here that I think it's a 75% difference in cost. And that's useful for whoever is going to occupy that building. Those cost savings can be passed along. And yeah. So how do you pay for these charging stations? So maybe you're putting up a new building and you're gonna need to put in some of these level 2s. So the state of Wyoming still has some Volkswagen settlement funds. There's 1.25 million available. This program has a 50-50 match. So you'd pay 50% of the cost and they would pay 50% of that cost. This program, it was meant to be, we were meant to have some of the, we were supposed to have a draft RFP on April 1st, and we still haven't seen that. So hopefully soon we'll have that out, but I think the timing is actually great. A lot of states have already expended all of these funds, but this might be something that will be useful to those in Teton County to apply for. Oh, it was slated to be open October 31st and then it got moved. This is an older slide, but so hopefully soon we'll be seeing this. Some other grants with funding from Teton Conservation District, we have $1,000 to go towards level 2 stations. The requirements of our grant is that it's located at a multi-unit dwelling or it's used for workforce charging or workplace charging. Then we also have some funding through Westmart EV at Scale, this kind of regional grant that we're a part of through the Department of Energy. And that's going to be putting some funding towards DC fast charging and level 2 stations at Stilson. We have applied for Vehicle Technologies Office grant. We haven't heard if we've received it or not, but that would help support level 2 stations at affordable housing in our region. And then there's currently the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Discretionary Grant Program. This came through the, this is from the IRA, or there's two pieces of legislation, the infrastructure bill, as well as the IRA that has a lot of different tax credits and funding opportunities. So this one we've known about for a while, and it's finally open and due actually the end of May. Unfortunately, the town of Jackson and Teton County have taken a leadership role and will be applying for this grant, so it can help contribute towards the needs that we have to put more charging in our community. Rebates, I just put this up as an example. There's some utilities throughout the country that offer rebates for charging infrastructure. Currently, we don't have that in our community. However, Phil did want me to mention that through Energy Conservation Works, he's not in here now. I was hoping he could. He just stepped out. They have 0 interest loans for generally energy efficiency things, but if you're making upgrades to your home for charging infrastructure or your panel to allow, so anything that you need to do to your house to get a charging station there, it can go through their loan program. So that's what we have. We don't have a rebate, but a loan program. Tax incentives. So if you're commercially installing one of these stations, there's a 30% tax credit on this, not to exceed 30,000. So that's useful. And then if you're in, it's only this only pertains to certain census tracts and communities, and luckily we're rural, so we fall within the qualifications of this, fortunately. So we'll be able to. Those in our community will be able to take advantage of this. And then consumers who purchase a charging station, they can receive up to $1,000 if you're installing one at your home. So just a couple other considerations about where these stations should be located. Think about near transit, located with other mobility options, e-bike charging and micro-mobility needs. It's always nice to consider that. And then Tanya has a couple slides about this information too, but I know just thinking about I'm just kind of answering some sort of questions that we receive, myth busting or whatnot, but the battery and the emissions associated with that is often a concern. And in this chart, it shows that battery is actually a really small sliver of the lifetime greenhouse gas emissions with compared to a gasoline vehicle. So just wanted to share that. And then also some other considerations. We're obviously very supportive of electric vehicles, but there is kind of a hierarchy of how we can reduce emissions in our community that, driving a single occupancy vehicle is actually last. But if we're going to be driving them, let's make them electric. So, and then this local action here is, I feel, very important. The town of Jackson is taking a huge leadership role. I think this is very valuable. It sends it provides an example for our region and for the country. So we're very thankful for the staff and the electeds that have passed this policy. Federal regulations, the EPA just came out with some new regulations on emissions for light duty and medium and heavy duty vehicles, but doesn't fully solve the problem. And often the actions at the local level have a bigger impact like this. So yeah, that's what I have. So thank you all. I did mention I did a plug, Phil. So great. So I'm going to pass this along to Tanya to put a little bit more context to some of this high level things that I was just saying. Thank you.
I think I'm going to try to move this down there. Great. I'm Tanya Anderson, and I'm the Ecosystem Stewardship Administrator for the town of Jackson. The work I do encompasses things related to air, land, water, wildlife, and climate change. Electric vehicles and their charging infrastructure are a small part of that, and they are, related to many of those things. So I'll be talking mostly about the new electric vehicle supply equipment ordinance that was passed by town council back in January, I believe was the last of the three readings. I want to acknowledge that Yellowstone-Teton Clean Cities was the organization that proposed this ordinance, and that our planning department, they were the ones who presented and pushed it forward. My role was really some discussions with them, answering questions or talking about the benefits of it, and letting all of you know about it here. So I just want to give credit where credit is due. Okay, will it go if I hit return? This is not my computer. I'm pressing the arrow down and it's not. I'm pressing that one too. Oh, did I move that in the wrong place?
There you go. So now you should be
great. To start, I just wanted to acknowledge that, things that the town does should be aligned with the comprehensive plan, the town of Jackson and Teton County joint comprehensive plan. And I'm not going to talk too much about these, but one of the principles in it is to reduce consumption from non-renewable energy, as well as reducing greenhouse gas emissions through transportation, specifically through transportation, acknowledging that transportation, both surface and air, are about 80% of our total emissions in this community. So we need to address that. Also in the chapter related to transportation, there's a specific goal to reduce greenhouse gases from vehicles to below the 2012 levels. And then finally, I'll just say that one out loud because we got that covering. But in April of 2020, Town Council passed a net zero resolution. So that is committing to carbon neutrality by 2020. And our surface transportations are a part of that, a huge part of that. So some of the background on the why. Alicia already mentioned that ground transportation accounts for quite a bit of our greenhouse gas emissions. This is 2021 kind of extrapolated from that information from the last greenhouse gas inventory. That having additional electric vehicles and electric vehicle infrastructure will help us meet those goals, and that retrofitting is more expensive than having the infrastructure there at the time of construction. There's great value to our community, both in cost savings over the life of the building as we transition to more electric vehicles. Homes are going to have a better resale value if the people who buy them don't feel like they have to do an expensive retrofit to be able to use the vehicle that they own at the time of purchase. The ability to meet the needs of not just homeowners, but also renters to be able to come to this area to accept a job and to be able to use the vehicle that they want to use, as well as visitors who come through, and of course, environmental benefits, including those decreased emissions, but also decreased pollution from things like motor oil. An electric vehicle doesn't use motor oil. You don't have to get it changed, so less maintenance in that aspect, but it's also not dripping on impervious surfaces and washing into our waterways. Also decreased noise pollution, which a lot of people appreciate in their neighborhoods. And also, it's funny, this is not my computer, so some of my photos are not showing up on this either. We'll see how that goes. There are public health benefits to cleaner air through reduced exhaust and emissions. So a study came out recently, I read about it last week, I believe, that we could have 1.3 million fewer days of missed school by school children who ride buses to school if vehicles, older diesel buses, specifically pre-2000 buses, I believe, were converted to cleaner technologies, such as electric vehicles, but it wasn't even specific to that. But that's because diesel emissions can make their way into the buses just through leaks, but also through, you all remember maybe riding a school bus and those old windows that pull down and then you stop and idle every time you pick another kid up. That's actually causing respiratory illnesses in children that cause, or it is attributed to 1.3 million days of school missed annually nationwide, which is pretty big. So, okay, there's my pictures. They came up last, I guess. We want to protect our vulnerable populations, those kids riding buses, kids biking to school, people with respiratory illnesses, and that helps all of us. A couple of definitions as we talk about this ordinance. EVSE means electric vehicle supply equipment. It's electric vehicle charging infrastructure, but that's kind of the technical thing there. And we are specifically talking about capable, EVSE capable and installed. Capable just means that you're providing the electrical conduit so that you can have a 40 amp, 240 volt branch circuit. That is the equivalent of a dryer plug-in. So that's the requirement there. It's not a requirement for those DC fast charges, though, this is the minimum. You could certainly do that. That means that if that is in there, you don't have to break up concrete or walls or anything like that to install it later. That's where those cost savings are. And so if somebody wants to install a charger later, as we have more electric vehicles, it is easy to do that. The installed is actually a space that is equipped with a level 2 charging station or above. So the ordinance that we set, that was approved, has different requirements for different types of buildings. So a detached dwelling unit or accessory residential unit, these are single family homes, ultimately single family housing units. They are required to have one space that is capable, meaning it has the electrical, it has a dryer plug-in, a capability near the parking, one of those per unit. For other residential and lodging, so that includes multifamily residential, that includes hotels, those types of things, it's required to have 30% of the spaces capable, so having that wiring, and 5% of the total spaces installed. And that starts once you have 10 parking spaces. And then other non-residential, so that might be an office space, a restaurant, something like that, requires 10% of the parking spaces to be capable, and that same 5% installed. And we did look at a lot of other communities to see kind of what was working, what other people were doing, and this was very much in line with what we saw in other communities. A few details related to this. All of the installed spaces count towards the capable requirement. So that 30% capable, the 5% installed is within that 30%. Any installed spaces have to have clear signage, and they also have certain height setbacks. That is to make sure that they're not so low that it's a safety hazard, that cars drive into them or drive over them and they cause damage in some way, shape, or form, and also that they're not enormous and overly visible. A couple of other things here. Just acknowledging that this comes into play when the building application is complete and considered sufficient, or sometimes the development application. So for example, the Millward Street apartments that were, at the town council meeting last Monday and being discussed, they had all of that in October, so they're not required under this ordinance that came into effect in January. So we're not going to see this in some of those new developments, but we'll see it in the future with anything else that is proposed and gets applied for moving forward. Kind of an overview of what this does and what it doesn't do here. It requires new infrastructure for new and expanded uses. It waives the installed requirement if every space is EVSE capable. So if there was maybe a small parking area of 10 spaces and all of them had the conduit and the wiring, there would be no installed requirement. We round up to the nearest number of whole spaces. A lot of times when you do the math, it might be like 3.6 spaces. We round up and we start once there's 10 spaces. There is the ability for the planning director to exempt or lessen the requirement. Now, there are some specifics on when they can do that. It's not just everybody can ask for an exemption. It is some specific things where if it is so far from electrical infrastructure that it really doesn't make sense and isn't in the, seen as the best need, fitting the best needs of the community, there could be an exemption there. I also want to talk about a few things the ordinance does not do. It does not have a requirement for existing buildings. It does not have a requirement for on-street parking. These are only parking lots and that are off-street. There's not a requirement for those lots with 9 or fewer spaces. We do not require anyone to purchase an electric vehicle or to provide charging for free to the public. So I wanted to go through a few examples of what this would look like. And in example number 1, we have a hotel with a lot of parking spaces. There is not a hotel that I know of that's coming to town fitting this. This is just a picture off of the internet. But because this is all for future development, I'm not using any existing developments as an example. So let's say we had a hotel coming. Hotel is residential. So, hotel and residential, I guess it's things serving people who are staying overnight, have the 30% requirement for capable and 5% installed. So if you do the math, this is nice round numbers on this one, 24 capable spaces, 4 installed. But if you remember, I said that installed is within the capable requirement. So what that means is a total of 24 spaces that will require the conduit. And of those, 20 are just capable. They don't need to have an actual charger. And 4 need to have charging stations installed, but they could be dual port. So it could be 2 charging stations that are dual port. Now, if you remember, you could also provide all 80 of those spaces as capable, and then you don't have to install any. Example number 2, quite a bit smaller here, might be a little more realistic, but let's say there's multifamily housing coming in, there are 16 parking spaces. That also requires 30% capable, 5% installed. So again, we're going to round up here from 4.8 and 0.8 to 5 spaces total. And you can do the math with me. How many need to be capable and how many need to be installed?
4 capable.
Yeah. 4 capable, 1 installed. I know I'm going to make you do math for your lunch hour because that's what you all wanted to do today. But just test you a little bit here. Or
5 capable. I'm sorry. 16 capable.
Or all 16 could be capable. Now this, providing capable to an 80 space parking lot might not be, the most efficient way to meet this requirement. But for a smaller multifamily housing unit, this actually might be the most efficient to provide capability for every unit. Maybe they're privately owned, so it's there. They don't have to retrofit to own an electric vehicle, but it'd be up to the owner or renter perhaps to install that actual charging station. Okay, we're going to go to example 3, a commercial building, maybe an office building or something like that. It has 35 parking spaces. So this one's a little different. The requirement for capable is less. Does anybody remember what it is? 10% capable, still the 5% installed. So our numbers here again, 3.5 and 2, 4 spaces total. Of those, 2 capable, 2 installed. Or $35 capable would be the alternative there. One more, which is the trick one. That wasn't supposed to pop up so fast. Why is it? It's supposed to come later. But an office building that only has 8 parking spaces because it is fewer than 10, there is no requirement for that one. Now, something to note here specifically is that this is based on the number of actual parking spaces. So there's a minimum number of parking spaces required by our land development regulations. So if you're going to develop with something, they're going to tell you based on that use or maybe the number of residential units or things like that, you need this many spaces. if a developer chooses to have more parking spaces, then this requirement is based on that, not on the minimum that's required, but what they actually have. Alternatively, there are some developments that get an exception and they actually provide fewer parking spaces than that minimum requirement. There would be very specific reasons for that. Perhaps it's housing for short-term workers who all have J1 visas and very few of them have cars. Therefore, there maybe isn't the need for as many parking spaces. So again, there would be a lessened requirement because it's on the actual spaces, not what the LDRs say you should have. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit. This ordinance is really designed to help our community move into the 21st century, to acknowledge the trend in more and more electric vehicles that we have in our community and across the country, in people who come here, who spend money here, who provide the tax base that a lot of our services are based on, and addressing the barriers to people being able to travel here in an electric vehicle, people being able to own one. One of those is, of course, cost. And Alicia had talked a bit about some of the Inflation Reduction Act rebates that people here qualify for that can help address that if people are really interested in getting an electric vehicle. Another is having access to charging at home or at work. Our town ordinance is hopefully going to address that. It might take 5, 10, 20 years till we really see the change in the turnover and more housing and workplaces having that charging infrastructure. But it's a step that we're taking now to work towards the future. Also, the funding that Alicia talked about, that YTCC provided for multi-unit dwellings to help them get more charging stations. That's seen as a real lack in our community. Range anxiety is a barrier. People not wanting an electric vehicle because sometimes you drive up to Yellowstone and you want the vehicle you drive to be able to get you there and back home. So Alicia talked about some projects that have more electric vehicle charging infrastructure being added. The Stilson parking lot is one example of that. But the town council recently approved $10,000 to help fund Yellowstone-Teton Clean Cities in a new program that will have a portable charger that people can borrow or rent. So somebody has an electric vehicle that works for them 98% of the time, and then maybe they can rent or borrow that charger when they're going up to Yellowstone for a weekend. And if they don't have access to a charging station where they're going, they would be able to use that there to get back home. And then, of course, the federal grant funding that we are hoping to apply for and hopefully get funding for that will provide more charging in our area. And finally, consumer information. The public knowing the facts, and that also means, people like you coming to things like this, but it also means the people who sell vehicles actually having the right information for people looking to buy vehicles. Some other concerns I've heard people talk about, I'm going to address here. One is impacts on the grid. We have this clean electricity that we get, relatively clean from Lower Valley Energy, a high mix of renewables. But if everybody gets an electric vehicle, will we have enough to cover? And how will that impact it? One of the things people have expressed concern about is what we call the duck curve. I didn't see it for a while, so I put a slide up here that actually shows the duck. And this is kind of that combination of we're moving towards more solar energy, more wind power, things like that, that don't provide steady state electricity and power in the way that coal and natural gas can. And so because it's more efficient to keep things going, things like coal-fired power plants don't shut down completely in the middle of the day when there's a lot of solar panel. They have to keep a base going so that they can reach the peak when people get home from work and shower and turn on their heat and their stove and their dishwasher and do their laundry and all of those things. And so you can see over time, there is a little bit of a steeper ramp up here going towards those ends of days. There's also some energy efficiency happening. This is California, where the peaks are actually less than they used to be, but it's also steeper. It is something to be thinking about. That said, in California, right now it's estimated that the contribution of electric vehicle charging to that peak is only about 1% of the peak. So there's a lot of things in there. And addressing it is really going to require looking at it in a grid level. So energy storage at a grid level, battery storage that can extend things like solar power for an extra hour or two. Those are going to be some of the solutions. That said, when you charge could lessen that. With the California example, I should say, it was expected to increase over time because of California's legislation, but it might be about 5% by 2030. So again, not a huge part of that curve. But I pulled this, this is the Town of Jackson Public Works building, which has some solar panels. And this was, I believe, from April 10th. So just, less than 2 weeks ago. So we are already in the spring producing more electricity through the solar panels at some times of the day. So this is our electricity use. You can see a little peak when people get to work at about 9 a.m. And that coincides, we actually can lessen that because we have this solar energy that's come in before 9 a.m. In the middle of the day, there are sometimes this orange here, this is all, the orange line is our solar production, the gray is the total. The little orange shaded is where we're actually producing more solar energy than we're using. Lower Valley Energy is great because they let us apply that to these times later when we're not producing solar. But workplace charging, which this ordinance will address because some office places will then have some charging available. Again, they don't have to provide it for free, but some people who don't have charging at home will be able to charge at work, and they may be able to use some of this excess during this time. So keeping that in mind. Another thing I've had some people express concerns about is the mining impacts of lithium. Batteries require lithium to build. And this graph shows the change from 1995 to 2020. It's not US production because there's very little US production, but it is global. And there are some environmental and human rights impacts of mining, especially in countries that have fewer human rights and environmental regulations than the United States has. Having some domestic mining of lithium will address that issue to some degree. Certainly it has some impacts locally, but it might be less than the impacts internationally. And we can expect this to increase as there are more electric vehicles, but we have some control over that as well. So this, I think, is the interesting chart here, that if we convert every vehicle as it is today to an electric vehicle of the same type, we will use a lot more lithium and cause a lot more mining to be done than if we downsize. So, and that includes both fewer vehicles overall and smaller vehicles. So in this, you can see here is an EV vehicle, like a sedan. And this is the use of lithium per rider capacity. And then the light blue is the battery and the amount of lithium used. You can see, you can see that a Hummer uses about 3 times the amount of lithium for its battery compared to a sedan. That would be, a Tesla, I think, is about 2.5 times more than what a Tesla uses, and about 5 times more than like a very small Nissan Leaf type of vehicle. So we don't want to just have all the Hummers become electric Hummers. We actually want some people who drive Hummers to get an electric vehicle that's a little bit smaller, maybe a Tesla or something like that. Buses, you can see here, they do use close to twice as much lithium as a Hummer, but because they have so much more rider capacity, the amount of lithium per rider is very beneficial. And of course, e-bikes use very, 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 very little. So that's a great option as well. So there is a study that is very interesting. I'm going to move this just in case people want to see that. And it is called Achieving Zero Emissions with More Mobility and Less Mining out of UC Davis. But this just shows a graph, no change in vehicle ownership and large batteries. The second one shows if there's reduced vehicle ownership, then smaller batteries, and then recycling. Once we start getting EVs at the end of their life cycle, recycling them will benefit because we can reuse that lithium. I will add that the town supported Teton County Integrated Solid Waste and Recycling in applying for an EPA grant worth about $2.5 million for some recycling center expansions that would include safe battery storage. So batteries are, of course, flammable. So having a safe place to store them can enable more recycling of those. Oh, why did that? Okay. Yeah, apparently I have to move this again.
Just tap the slide.
No. Oh, oh, that was not what I meant to do. How do I get back?
It's just on another screen.
Okay. Does it go forward? Yes.
That would be shared the screen.
Oh. And where is, it's not popped up. Yep. Okay. Big picture, electric vehicles are a part of the solution. Reduce greenhouse gas emissions, reduce pollution, reduce noise, healthier people. That's great. And the town of Jackson has taken a lot of steps to support the electric vehicle transition, including this ordinance. And public transit, active transit, mobility hubs, complete neighborhoods, these things are all an even bigger part of the solution. So again, we don't want you to just replace your current large vehicle with another. We want to be able to have transit that works, mobility options for everyone that reduce vehicle use. And that also reduces congestion and some other issues that aren't addressed when we just switch from one single occupancy vehicle to another. The example I want to give here is electric start bus. So this is promoting public transit. A lot of people can fit on that. It is using electric charging, so less emissions from this vehicle. And it has a bike rack on the front that allows people to bike to and from or bike one way or another. I used this last summer a lot. I would bike to the bus station, take the bus to work, and then bike from where I got dropped off to work. That was the fastest way for me to get to town when there wasn't a lot of traffic in the morning. And then on the way home, I would bike all the way home. I would free two birds with one hand by getting my exercise while also getting myself home from work. And that was faster than taking the bus when there was high congestion in the evening. So thinking about all these things in conjunction and making them work for people is what we're really looking to do here. I think that's all I've got. Thanks. And we have a little bit of time for questions, and maybe Alicia will want to come back up.
Well, I'd like to begin by thanking the town of Jackson, Phil and others and Alicia for facilitating this action. I think it's wonderful. I have, in my usual fashion, a little concern about looking forward. I think the 2030 federal regulations are going to be more substantial than what this could accommodate. So I'd like to see it not be too difficult to upgrade the ordinance or whatever as things do progress. That would be great. And then the other main question I have is about the lithium. I also thought that there was some battery research and testing going on with copper, I think, and maybe hydrogen. Do you guys know anything about that?
I know Ford has invested in a new battery, or at least one new battery plant. They'll be producing, two different types of batteries that aren't lithium ion, and that's in Michigan. But yeah, there's lots of research going on. I think like as we get more EVs on the road, less and less are going to be so dependent on lithium ion. There'll be other ways of other types of batteries.
And then just a little footnote, seeing Mike behind me. I'm hopeful that the state of Wyoming is going to not put up any kind of barriers to these kinds of actions, and in fact, be on board for facilitating this process.
The state of Wyoming administers the VW grant, and is going to administer the NEVI grants, which is going to go around the interstates first, and then if there's extra money in the other corridors. The transportation committee over this course of this year is going to take a look at EVs, but I think the focus is actually going to be on how to tax EV usage on the road to replace the fuel tax, because our fuel tax revenues have been dropping. Especially what I think they want to focus on is the intrastate travels, the travel through Wyoming on electric vehicles, or if trucks start coming with electric trucks, how you tax those users. So that's going to be a focus over the course of this year. If you want to pay attention to those, all of those committee meetings are on our wildlunch.gov website, and we post the agendas for those committee meetings.
And a reminder that the state charges registration fee. $200.
Currently charging a $200 fee. If they decide to tax vehicles, I'm going to argue for you can't do both, right? Figure out how to determine what the most appropriate way to replace fuel tax revenue is.
Thank you for being here to answer those questions. I will say to address one part of that, this ordinance is really specifically trying to encourage more infrastructure for new builds, which when it's less expensive, it doesn't mean that people can't retrofit. This just isn't requiring it. And there isn't currently much, or we're not seeing federal funding that's focused on retrofits. It's really focused on new build and trying to do it as efficiently as possible and prepare for the future and just have more of that infrastructure. So maybe if we only have 2 charging stations now, we can add and make it be 10 later. That said, the funding you have for multi-unit dwellings, it does apply for retrofits. So locally.
Yeah, I just want to add briefly on to what Mike was saying, and Mike's been great in this well. But I will highlight, Sandy, I'm watching very closely the management council and corporations that are looking at government regulation, local government regulation. So I would be shocked if our ordinance here does not come up in some of those committee meetings as examples of why we're making housing more expensive. And so from that standpoint, I do see a risk. It's relatively narrow, but there are those in the legislature that like to ignore local control when it deals with stuff. So I just want to add that, Mike. I don't know where that's going to go yet, which everyone really knows, but I'll be really surprised.
Lower operating costs.
Yes.
Actually, I have 2 questions. I'll answer too. One is, you talked about that's fine. I know we're talking about park service. One of the questions was simply, and I haven't heard if their answer was, they were going to talk to LVE just to see if the grid itself can handle the charging stations, not the power, but just the actual grid and the actual draw through the wires. Because having lived in Coulter Bay for 19 years, we had a generator, and by God, we lost power a lot. And so, that was one of the questions. I don't know where LVD is on that at this point. Great things is more power stations coming or not.
Yeah.
Is there actual supply lines?
Yeah.
Locations?
With DC fast charging, you need access to phase 3 power, and the Grand Teton National Park did an internal review to see where they need stations simply for their internal fleet, not
Right. I know
necessarily. And so they have found that there is access to phase 3 power, at least in the Moose area, and there is also Jackson Lake Lodge area that I'm aware of. There might be anyone in this room.
Until the lake goes out in Moran.
What's that?
So when the power links goes out in Moran, but yeah, should that makes sense. There are always phase 3 power around. It's just not necessarily solid all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, but there's other options that the park and others can consider in Wyoming and other rural areas. There's now there's a couple different chargings. There's one called FreeWire where it's a DC fast charging station, but it trickle charges and it has battery backup. And then there's other ones too that are powered by propane actually, which depending on where you're at could potentially be less or have better emissions than the grid. But those are off grid, so you're not relying on that, and it could continue to charge even if things go out. So there's ways around it if those are the issues.
My second question, actually, is that You know, not that they're gonna probably listen to me or any other individuals, but I'm curious. The House is just now making a move on the debt reduction act to turn around and try to force President Biden to step back all the green energy incentives that they put in place at this point. And so I'm just curious if anybody's organizations per se, I'm going to do individually, are going to go ahead and reach out to our representative, who probably won't listen to me, but I simply say, we don't think you should be rolling back green incentives at this point. Because I think that needs to be organizationally put forward to that representative. That's not exactly her favorite thing. But, it's just a point that we're talking about lots of incentives, but they're already under attack.
Yeah.
So.
That's certainly something we can do as an organization.
I mean, you get nonprofits and do tickets.
Yeah, yeah. I think Phil had his hand up first, and then we'll go back. to
Yeah,
Kevin.
and just really quickly, in a typical Jackson form, we'll make a comment during the question here. It's just kind of, it's a timeless conversation about kind of the future of the grid and the impacts of this. I think really helpful thing to think about is based on the average residential monthly use here with Lower Valley Energy, adding an electric vehicle to your home will increase that average about 15%. Now, if you layer all of the other opportunities from weatherization, the heating system upgrades to rooftop solar, and all the other opportunities that are out there, you can look at it from the standpoint of if your home business, whatever it may be, can be 15% more efficient, you can add an electric vehicle into the mix with net zero impact on the grid. So there's an opportunity to marry efficiency with the deployment of EVs without a net impact, particularly at the residential level. That's reasonable and attainable.
Megan?
I have a mix of a comment and a question. I bought a new electric vehicle in January when the incentives came out, which is a great deal. I love it. But a lot of the factors that you sometimes don't think about are coming into play. Okay, so I've got an electric vehicle. Where do I plug it in? Well, I've got a Tesla charger sitting in a box in my basement, but there's snow on the ground and it's frozen. So I'm plugging it into the free town chargers, which is incredible that Jackson does this and saved my butt. But eventually I want to put mine in there. I just sent an email today to get quotes and figure out how to do it. The other factor is I realize there's a big difference between fast charging and level 2 charging. Level 2 charging takes about 10 hours on my car. And when I do it in the wintertime, I'm thinking, okay, I can't park on the streets overnight. That's in the winter ban. So does that apply to the charging stations in the parking lots? And I'm kind of like, I don't really know. It's kind of a little conflict that we have going on there. The other thing I found is that other non-electric vehicles are parked in front of the chargers. And so how do I get in there when someone else is parked there that's not using that feature? The other thing is I noticed the fast charger in the parking garage. One of the two has been out almost all winter since I've had my vehicle. The other one works. So the consistency of that. And then my last comment is for social equity and income. We need to realize that people that are renting maybe won't have electric vehicles and have so many barriers that they won't do it. But when they go and rent, it's like, oh, do you have an electric charging station for me to use? So I'm glad to see that you do this developments. But I was telling Tanya earlier, there is a difference between assigned parking spaces like I have, where I can put one in my assigned parking space, versus non-assigned, where people are rotating in and out. So a lot of these little factors come into play when all of a sudden you present the vehicle and say, what do I do now?
Yeah. I'll talk about a couple of those things. I would say any regulation that applies to a street or an outdoor parking area that's plowed in the winter also applies to the electric vehicle charging spaces. So they don't get free overnight parking while other people, they still need to be plowed. So those do apply. There's the parking garage and some areas that have an indoor space and a little more flexibility there. Let's see, addressing some of the others, we did leave a lot of flexibility up to the developer to figure out how to do it. So like I said, it could be capable for every unit, or it could be 30% and 5%. And that 5% maybe would be, say, guest parking spaces that do rotate in so that, one car can use it for 2 hours and another one can use it for 4 hours. And then it can, address the needs of more people with electric vehicles in the same multifamily housing. And yeah, the flexibility, we don't know yet what works best. And it might work differently in different units. So different development. So we left a lot of flexibility to the developer there. Did you want to address any of those? I feel like there were a lot of things in there.
I know,
but
yeah. I think that it is interesting, like until you're actually driving the vehicle, you don't necessarily understand some of these nuanced situations that you'll meet. But yeah, I think you did address some of them. I can chat with you a little bit more after. The thing about ICE vehicles and the electric spaces, that's a tricky one. Because that would be, like police aren't necessarily giving tickets for that, but it is.
Right. Well, and a lot of them, if there is a sign that says electric vehicles only, that would be different from a lot of them. And I'll say, for example, I think the Tesla charging station at Whole Foods, it isn't specified that it can be only for electric vehicles because they installed greater capacity than is being used. Therefore, those spaces can be used by other vehicles. And part of this is getting more capacity than we need so that there is capacity in the future, if that makes sense, where maybe some of those spaces do get changed to electric vehicle only or something like that later.
Sometimes the town needs that be something that we got to do.
Yeah.
Just most of those electric vehicles only. And we do have town parking enforcement. Maybe that just becomes part of their because that's not that big a deal. We talk about visitors coming in from electric vehicles. Huge frustration would be if you're a visitor, you drive into your charging home, so we park there for 3 hours if they're allowed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to ask Bailey if there were any online hands raised, just so that we don't forget about people attending virtually.
Yeah, the link in the chat is our project manager from Bozeman. Wanted to share that most lithium is mined in Australia. And he shared a graph about it and it said cobalt is the element of most concern mined in Africa. It's being reduced in most battery attacks.
I just want to confirm, I think you said this, Alicia, but I live in one of the multi-unit developments that was constructed by the Housing Trust. But it's obviously before this regulation, it's fairly new, but it missed this, unfortunately. But it sounds like you said that if our group decided that we wanted to retrofit, that we could actually get some grant money. Is that true?
Yeah.
Yeah. So would we do it on our own, or would we do it through you guys, or how would we find that money?
We have the grant funding from the Conservation District it's $1,000 to go towards multi-unit dwelling infrastructure. Right. And then if there's other opportunities, we put everything out in our newsletter and things, but that's like the very specific one that you can apply for at the moment. So we can chat.
Yeah, you get $1,000.
Yeah.
Housing costs going up, and I expect more commuters I know daily commuters for work here, and of course, Starville. Are there any incentives from the town and or county for people to ride the bus?
If they work for the town provides a 50% cost share for a bus pass. And so I know some other employers do that as well. Jackson Hole Mountain Resort provides 100% of the cost. And so typically that has gone through the employer to provide those incentives. And that can be in a lot of different ways. I've heard of people that are purchasing e-bikes for their employees to be able to get to a workplace that maybe doesn't have much parking, or something like that. It doesn't have to be through the bus, but yeah, getting more businesses on board to help support that could be a part of the solution as well.
I cannot miss this opportunity. There are a number of elected officials that are thinking about fear-free in various contexts. Right? I'm one. We don't have the funding sources to produce that. We don't. We can't afford it, particularly. So to me, that's a great example of supporting people that are asking those questions and supporting when things come up about looking at new revenue streams, that it's not just the anti-tax group that it's people that are interested for that. And I had a discussion this morning about what were we talking about? I don't even know what budget this one. They were asking for something. They were asking for a provision of additional services. Relatively small item. That voice, I'm hearing it now. I'm hearing years now. But when it comes to a discussion with Teton County about how we fund joint departments that would free up budget in our budget to allow to do some of that, or better yet, legislation in the state of Wyoming that would allow us to do a property transfer tax that would give us additional revenue, that would allow us to support things like that. That's when we need to hear those voices. So it's a very indirect. It would be a significant increase in cost of start. But I love it. We don't have it. And it's going to take a while. Great on that content. But I really appreciate that. Now, I'm enjoying some light architecture. We're 100% of our line of but yeah, I mean, I think businesses are probably the best place to go right now.
And is START not subsidized
Oh, yeah.
significantly? So there's already a cost. Yeah,
No, I mean,
the public has already paid
I
part of
think
it.
it's 80% of our operation costs. So it's and I think the other thing that's interesting in that discussion is we're also in the process of reviewing regional management and funding of START, which comes to play with that as well, because clearly right now it's paid for by town, county, and we're serving.
Another comment on, I understand that you're looking at the airport bus service, and ultimately we're trying to reduce unnecessary trips to the airport in single occupant vehicles or two people. And I read somewhere that 56% of the people that live here get someone to drive them to the airport, drop them off, and come back. And so the bus service could actually really, I'm sure you're aware of that, but how do you mix it and all that kind of thing? One of the things I was thinking about, could we have a add-on fee, an airport fee for the rental cars, which are primarily out-of-state people that rental cars, and say add a $10 fee that would bring revenue in to support the bus service for other people that are trying to go back and forth. Also, could we have a per plane embarking and disembarking fee that helped to pay for that? So each individual that flew in and out would pay $10 in addition to their cost of their.
Kevin, yes. I'm meeting with the airport manager tomorrow. We had a discussion about this one right now. That has been an issue that's been on the town county radar for years. It's also an expansion service question. The challenge with the airport, most of what they do up there is heavily regulated by the FAA. And the vast majority of that requires that funding be spent on site, except for parking and transportation. It's one place where there's some flexibility. So the airport is joining with the town and county and START to do a plan and pilot, hopefully this summer, to put together a plan to do that. And the airport is a really hard thing to serve. Because you've got 400 to 500 employees, very different schedule. Then you have the members of the public coming and going. You're a very different schedule that you have to accommodate the delayed flight for an hour. Or I mean, it's a really tough nut to crack. So we want to make sure we do it right. We've had 2 attempts at it in the past. One of them worked. The ride to fly, the first iteration, because we had a provider that was great and made it work. The second iteration, the provider wasn't as focused on success and it didn't work. So we've done a couple of starts on that, no pun intended, and it is on our radar. It's funded in the start. It is in the start budget to be funded by the airport at the moment. There'll be some discussion about that as well. So it very much is on our radar. And I think for me, it's really important to get it right. One of the things I'm planning on talking tomorrow about is the airport is just in the process of taking over a private business with the fixed base operation with private jets. To me, in theory, that has many fewer FAA limitations because it's a private business that happens to be owned by the airport. So there's a lot of discussion that's taking place. I see some real action. Maybe as early as this.
Well, thank you everyone for coming, and if there's more discussion or questions, please stick around, we can all chat, but thank you very much for coming.
I have some technical thing.
Yeah.
So me as an individual living in that parking garage, can I get $1,000 myself or does it have to go to?
No, it would be $1,000.
Thanks again.
You're welcome.